All right, welcome everyone. Good to see people from around the country here. A little cozier than our meeting last month, and this will be a little bit more open for discussion, which I love. Actually, these type of calls. We've got very special guest here, Trey Webster, Legislative Director from Congressman Dean Phillips' office, is going to join us in just a little bit. We're really going to dive into some of the tips and tricks for meeting with legislators. Every time we talk to people, I think we get a better perspective of what works and what doesn't. So we're really thrilled to have Trey here tonight. So appreciate you joining us. And we might get Ken Chusnick. I know we advertised that, but Ken just texted me, just giving everybody a heads up early that he's still in session and they're dealing with a bunch of bills and people are, Trey, I'm sure you can relate, talking too much, as he said. So he's going to try to, get out of there early if he can and join us. But anyway, I just wanted to give you that heads up. I just got that text a while ago. And so he may pop on, he may not. But either way, we're going to have a great conversation tonight. And Ken, as some of you know, is a longtime American Promise volunteer who won he won the first time running as a state representative in the House of Representatives and the state legislature of Wyoming, and he just won. So now he's going to be able to give us a very unique perspective of an American Promise volunteer inside the state house. So if it's not tonight, I'm sure Ken is going to be coming on one of these calls soon to share with us, all he's learned so far. So February 8th, that's today. So what we're going to go over tonight on this call is a couple of fun things to start off with. First, Volunteer of the Month for January. We're going to announce that in just a minute. We're also going to be doing Grassroots Victory for January. That's something that we decided to do in addition to Volunteer of the Month because there's so much activity out there happening out there in the States. We want to be able to celebrate, both individual achievements and more team efforts. Then I'll just give you an overview of what legislative advocacy is and why it's important here at American Promise. And then we may or may not get Wyoming State Representative Ken Chusnick, as I just told you. And then we're going to dive into a little bit with Trey Webster, who's a legislative director for Congressman Dean Phillips. Chris is then going to give us a rundown of the candidate pledge program, just give us an update on where we're at with that program. We're going to explain the Citizen Challenge for February, which is related to legislative advocacy. And then we will wrap up with hopefully some time for some Q&A, and we will do that throughout. And then we'll just talk about the next call, next national call, and then some trainings that we have leading up to Citizen Lobby Week, which is going to be the week starting March 13th. And this is basically a local citizen lobby day where we can go and meet with our elected officials in district. We are very well known here at American Promise for doing a citizen lobby day on Capitol Hill over there or down there in DC. And we want to put some emphasis on very local meetings at all levels of government, which Chris is going to talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. So with that said, let's get into the first volunteer of the month, certainly since I've been here. I'm excited to announce is Marie, Marie Henselder-Kimmel. And a lot of you know Marie, but I want to be really clear that this award for Volunteer of the Month for January has actually nothing to do with all that Marie has done for American Promise throughout her, let's call it career here, which is a lot. And a lot of you know Marie. She's very active with American Promise, but has actually done a ton just in the last month. She's still at it. She has been getting the writing team going again, and which is exciting because she's got a lot of experience there. And she brings, like, she used to do calls with Sam Daly Harris and a lot of our volunteer leaders here at American Promise. They have years of knowledge of writing. So she's just started that team up again, and extremely happy about that. She's also working on a new generic presentation for American Promise with Ann Drum, who's done an absolutely outstanding job on that as well. And just called an emergency writing team call just Monday after the big announcement came out that the Kochs are going to dump in an ungodly sum of money into the next election cycle. So amazing, Marie. I don't know if you want to say just a couple words about the writing team and what you're doing there, but we certainly have a couple of minutes if you want.
Well, I'm dumbfounded. Thank you so much. Yeah, our writing team, we meet monthly on the third Tuesday of the month. And we had said when we met in January that if something came up that really seemed like it probably would be kind of nationwide in terms of coverage, we would call an emergency meeting and try to come up with some ideas about, for writing in that. And the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal and New York Times, among other media outlets, covered the fact that the Kochs announced on Saturday night that they're going to put in money to pick the best candidate for the GOP and intercede in the primaries, which they've never done before. So we kind of looked at those articles. We did this Monday night. I called it for Monday night. And since Monday night, we've had 8 submissions. And actually Esther Diamond is on the call tonight, and she has already been published. It was in a Patch local online media, but we've had quite a few, at least 3 submissions to the Wall Street Journal, 4 to the New York Times, and 2 to the Washington Post. So we hopefully will see something in print. And if you're interested in coming to join us, I will put the registration link in the chat. And our next meeting is the Tuesday the 17th, I believe, is the date. And love to see you. If you haven't written before, we have some guidelines. If you have written before, we're happy to have you join us.
Cool. Well, thanks, Marie. And I should also add that we're going to actually print these out. And Jeff Clements, the founder and president of American Promise, is actually going to sign them. And we're going to send them to you in the mail. So
thank you.
Just so you know, of course. And so with that said, that's obviously a great achievement for Marie. Thanks for saying a few words, Marie. Now we're going to move on to the grassroots victory of January, and that was much more team oriented. And for that, it's going to be Nancy Morgan and her team in Virginia for organizing the Virginia Democracy Day. This was pretty easy winner, honestly, in January. This is an incredible event. This is exactly what we like to see happening in every state. So they had a really strong coalition of different groups. Right, so I'm just going to name a few here that Nancy mentioned. Obviously, American Promise, John McCree even helped out a little bit over there in Virginia this year, our business network manager. Big Money Out Virginia, which is what Nancy heads up. Fair Vote, Upvote Virginia, Common Cause, the Impact Project, Represent Us, Clean Virginia, the National Transparency Project, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund, and Freedom Virginia. So amazing. We want to keep building these coalitions in every single state. This is how we do it. Amending the Constitution cannot be one organization, right? Or just a small group of people. It really needs to be a pretty big, massive coalition of groups, people getting behind this amendment and saying, hey, there's a lot of things going on, but we really need to clean up the election system first, as this major root cause of our dysfunction. So Nancy, we also will print out, a few for you and your team, whatever you want, you can just tell me. And I'll allow you to say, a few words yourself about this event.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And actually I have to give credit to Vicki Barnes in Minnesota, who they did this last year with a bunch of other people. It really made a difference to have partners. We had like 60 people that we divided up. We went to the House and the Senate. We're introduced in each chamber. It corresponded with Senate hearings on campaign finance bills. We had our 5 people testify. Here we're having a press conference to a packed room, and it's interesting, we had 3 Democrats there, 1 in the Senate and 2 in the House. The woman, Vivian Watts, in the red coat, introduced the resolution to the resolution supporting a constitutional amendment. And then they were saying, well, it's too bad that no Republicans are there. And right after that, a Republican walked in the room who has signed our pledge, and he introduced a bill to ban money from foreign influence corporations in our General Assembly. So it was a very exciting time. Of course, every single bill that was killed in our House of Delegates, including the constitutional amendment. 3 are coming over from the Senate just as we speak this week. Hopefully we'll have 1 or 2 of these pass, but I can just only emphasize the importance of collaboration with partner organizations, upvote, rank, fair vote, work on ranked choice voting, getting these partners together to look at good governance, to build up these numbers. So this was our first Democracy Day, but it certainly wasn't our last. And thanks so much, Mike, for the lovely certificate. Thank you.
You bet. All right. Thanks, Nancy. And I'm just going to click through a couple more pictures here from that day. They even got buttons printed up. Couple of great shots. That's a good one. Someone had a nice camera for that one, huh? It's a great shot. And then this is a phenomenal photo here too. So yeah, great job to Nancy and her team. And I just want to remind everyone, if you don't know, we just launched on our last call last month a new, it's really an online portal. It's going to be a learning and action center. So you're going to be able to go there, learn about all kinds of different things in this movement, how to take different types of actions. So it's still in the very early stages, but eventually you're gonna be able to go there and learn how to canvas, how to prepare for a meeting, just about everything. But there's a few things you can go there and do right now. So if you haven't yet, just go there, set up an account. It's very easy, just log in, email, username. And Chris is going to be talking about that a little bit more later in the call. So if you take care of that now, you'd be ahead of the game if you can do that. So that's action.americanpromise.net. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit about legislative advocacy before we get to either Ken or Trey, depending if Ken can get away from his floor discussions over there at the Wyoming State House. So just to give you the basics, if anyone's new, I always like to make sure everyone understands what we're talking about with some of these terms. So legislative advocacy, it essentially means anything that has to do with legislation. We are trying to amend the United States Constitution here at American Promise. And the Constitution is essentially legislation. And amending it takes legislation, right? In our case, what we're trying to do is we're getting an amendment introduced in Congress, and then for it to make it out of Congress and go to the states to be ratified, which we need 38 states to approve it, we need someone to introduce that legislation, right? And so that's just how this process works. That's the first step. And then, of course, we need to build that massive support to actually get it out of Congress. But the thing is, there's other types of legislation that we can get introduced and passed that helps build support and momentum for that much bigger piece of legislation, right? The Constitution. And that's really where a lot of our focus right now is going to be this year. And we're going to put a renewed focus on local legislation. So what we mean is a city council resolution that supports the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment, a county resolution. Some of you might know there was a board county vote just before the new year in Wisconsin, and it passed with like a 92% vote. So we really want to get those types of things going all over the country. And then, of course, there's state resolutions as well. 22 states have passed either a state resolution through the legislature or done a citizen initiative in support of an amendment to deal with big money in politics. And you might think, well, it's just a little county or, city level legislation. It might not mean anything. And that's true on some level. By itself, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It's not going to get the Constitution amended. But when you start adding it up, it actually really starts to build a decent amount of pressure around the entire country. We have to remember that when we started this campaign around 2011, not American Promise specifically, but just the movement to deal with this issue, there weren't any resolutions. It was 0 initially. And then one by one, the first town, the first state started to stand up and say, oh, there's a major problem here. So it's a way, these pieces of legislation are a way for us to communicate. And city level helps to build state level helps to build congressional level. It's the way that we speak essentially for things that we really feel as a people, right? As a society that we need fixed. So the only way to get these pieces of legislation introduced and passed is for us to take that responsibility of going and talking to our elected officials. And if you're new, that might seem daunting, but I promise you, after you do it once, you're gonna probably see it in a totally different light. You'll realize, wow, these are actually just nice people, even if they totally disagree on let's say 90% of issues with you. This issue is pretty easy to talk to people about. Everybody has an opinion, and everybody usually thinks that they have a solution one way or another, whether it's putting some kind of limits on campaign spending, whether it's limiting super PACs, whether it's limiting foreign money, whether it's more transparency, right? There are a decent amount of things that we can do to make our election system work better and work for the people, right? So that our voice can be restored again in government, because that is ultimately what we're trying to fix. We feel shut out. What we think, what we feel doesn't matter anymore in our government. So that's what legislative advocacy is about. And that's why it's so important to what we do here at American Promise, because we are dealing with legislation at the end of the day. And again, Chris is going to talk a little bit about that, but I don't believe we have Ken, right? Ken, say it, shout out if you're on here. I don't think so.
No, Ken.
No Ken. Okay. So that may give us a little more time, which is fine, with Trey Webster, Legislative Director for U.S. Congressman Dean Phillips. I think it's easy for us to get discouraged when we talk about Washington, D.C., right, and our government, and for good reason, obviously. But it's also important for us to remember that there actually are really good people, working within those walls of Congress down there, within the belly of the beast, you might say. And Trey is one of those good people. I went down there mid-August, I believe, ahead of our NCLC event this past fall, and Trey was the person actually who gave me a tour of the Capitol grounds, so I could actually have a sense of how it all worked there, and was able to relay that information to a lot of our volunteers who had never been there, ahead of time. So definitely appreciate that, Trey. You went above and beyond. We did a full tour of the Capitol grounds, took quite a bit of time, and I just really think that that's an important point as we go through this call tonight, is to think about people like Trey. It's not just him. There's a lot of good people in there. I've experienced it myself over the last 10 plus years of doing this. People get into that job because they want to make a difference, and so Trey, I think we can bring you on now and kind of open up this dialogue a little bit. How you doing tonight?
Great. I am doing great. Thanks for having me. It's fantastic to be here and talking to you guys. The 118th Congress is finally getting up and running, and this is kind of the first week that all the committees have started getting together and offices are starting to get staffed up, and it's kind of an exciting time to be here. There's a lot of energy, a lot of interest in what's going to happen over the next couple of years, a lot of change that hasn't happened in a while. And so it's a kind of an exciting time. So Thanks for having me.
You bet. So Trey, why don't we just start off with, why in the world did you decide to go into the belly of the beast down there and get into this job?
Yeah, I mean, it probably not any different from a lot of you folks. Just wanted to be a part of the process and make change, and recognizing that one of the ways to do that is through the laws that are written and passed and enacted. And I came to law school here in DC. I went to Georgetown, and being in Georgetown is such an interesting experience because you have all these you're down the street essentially from the Capitol, and so ostensibly we're learning about law and reading case law and learning the legal procedures, but almost all of it is kind of in this background of the process that goes into the laws that we're reading about, the people who are writing it, what's going into that thought process, how is that interpreted. So that got me really excited to use that education on the Hill. And I've been lucky enough, so I joined Congressman Phillips' team about 2 years ago now. So I've been with him for a little while. This is his 5th year in Congress, so kind of came in halfway point of his term as it is now. Started as a legislative counsel covering, so for those of you maybe not familiar with kind of the congressional office, one function of the office is the legislative side. So these are the folks who are kind of in charge of writing the bills, writing recommendations for how the congressman should vote, preparing them for meetings on policy. So when I joined the team 2 years ago, I was just a member of that team covering, among other things, election reform, campaign finance. Dean is a really great member for that. He doesn't take PAC dollars. He doesn't take lobbying dollars. He doesn't even take dollars from other members of Congress. He's actually the only member who kind of doesn't take money in that group, which is surprising, I think. So I came on board to do that, and in the last, at the beginning of this year, I was promoted to be legislative director, which means I now kind of run that team of other people who are all advising the congressman on policy and things of that nature. So I guess I haven't been there long enough to be jaded by it yet. I still love it. It's still exciting. Even though, my party is in the minority now, it's actually kind of an interesting time because Dean is someone who works pretty well with members of the other side, and a lot of issues that he cares about actually have bipartisan support, at least kind of at the foundational levels. Maybe we kind of disagree on how we address it, but at a basic level, the things that he really cares about, which include, campaign finance, are things that members across the aisle care about. And so I'm actually kind of excited because I think that, there's a lot of opportunity to get some things done. But I guess we'll see.
Nice. Yeah, cool. Nice, man. So let's start with as far as setting up a meeting, right? This is one of the questions I definitely wanted to ask you. You've been in the room, right? You've seen people come try to get meetings with, in this case, Congressman Phillips, but you may have seen it in other places that you've worked. So I'm just curious, what is the initial stage like, and is there such thing as too persistent, and what does that look like? Because I know that there's definitely a balance, as I've tried to do this over the years. How much do you push teams to get that meeting, to be persistent, right? What do you have a sense of, like, where that line is? Can you give us any guidance on that?
Yeah, there is a line for sure. And it's also kind of a confusing process because, if you're trying to meet with the member themselves, you're probably going through the scheduler, who kind of is the master of the congressman's schedule. And so, regardless of substance of the meeting or who's involved, that scheduler is going to be looking at the congressperson's time across everything to try and figure out okay, how do we manage their time appropriately. But then if you're trying to set up a meeting with a staff member, it's maybe a little more flexible, it's a little easier, but you need to have the connection with that person to know who to ask and to reach out. I think the line, it's one of those, I guess it when you see it. More than one, less than, I don't know, 5 outreach.
But more than one, though, right? I mean, that's actually one thing I did want to kind of just discuss with you, because I think a lot of people might get discouraged after one, right? It is important to double back, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I can tell you, no one on Capitol Hill is offended if you send a first contact and you don't hear back within a window of time and you follow up with them. You don't send the email twice in one day. Be like, hey, did you get that? Maybe give it a little bit of room to breathe. Part of that timing is also kind of dependent on, is Congress in session? Are we in recess? If we're in session, we might not even have a chance to look at our emails until 6 o'clock, and then we're kind of just hitting the highest priority. So we might wait until later to respond to things looking further out. But yeah, absolutely do not feel afraid to circle back with someone, even if someone responds to you and says, thanks so much, I'll get back to you. If they haven't gotten back to you in a time that you need that information to start scheduling things, reach back out to them and just say, hey, just checking up on this, want to get it on the calendar, want to make plans. That's totally fine. The number of emails that fly around in staffers' inboxes are unbelievable. And so quite frankly, it's helpful for us to have that multiple outreaches, because it's multiple points throughout the process where we can be responsive. So maybe you catch us at the right time on your second outreach. I will say, there is a certain point, if you've sent like 3 or 4 emails and none of them are responsive, you've maybe called the office and you've gotten the runaround. That might not be a meeting that you're going to be able to have. That might be one that you put on the back burner, wait until like the next time you're starting to do that and reach back out again. It could be it could be nefarious. They don't know who you are. They don't actually want to meet with you. It could just be something as simple as they don't have a staff person covering that issue and they don't have the time to really engage on it. And so they just kind of ignore it. I wouldn't take it personally one way or another.
We'll talk about that just a little bit too, actually, because you said, they may not be familiar with you, right? So
yeah,
something we talk about is as a suggestion, as a tip, is to find the person who actually can get the meeting, right? And so have you seen anyone who could not get a meeting and then pivoted and maybe got like a local business person or someone with a little bit more influence to get the meeting and to ask for the meeting instead, and seen that as an effective method?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, any type of connection you have to the office or someone in the office is going to be helpful, if for no other reason than to just kind of, when I'm looking through the X number of emails that I received today, and I can only pick 20 to get through before the end of the day, if it's a name in my inbox that I recognize, I've spoken to before, that's probably one that I'm going to look at, because that's a relationship I've already developed. I know who they are. I trust them. So it just kind of helps elevate it a little bit. I will say, when you're making these outreaches, one of the most important things is, if you are a constituent in that district, make that clear, or do a meeting with the constituent. Even if like one of you is and one of you is not, make it clear that one of you is a constituent, because when we're looking at time management, the number one priority is constituents. And so, we get outreach from big organizations who want to talk about, whatever they're doing. But if they can't identify how it's connected to our district at all, it's really hard to prioritize that meeting over, a group of constituents who are coming to talk about like a local school issue or something. And so if you make that clear up front, I'm a constituent, I live in your district, and this is the issue I want to talk about, that makes it so much easier for us to prioritize that meeting.
Okay, nice. And then what do you think makes a meeting really effective? What is something that is going to make a staffer want to give that constituent a meeting with the representative directly? Are there certain things that we can do?
I'd say the number one thing is tell us why our boss should care, because we have to advocate for our meetings to the congressman as well. When I want Dean to have a meeting with someone, that might be the same time that our foreign affairs staffer wants to have a meeting with Dean about an issue that's coming before the committee. And it might be the same time our health staffer has a health policy person, they want to have time with Dean. And so all of us are advocating to the scheduler and to the congressman, like, in your limited amount of time, these are the ones that these are the meetings you should take. This is how you should use your time. And so when we are making that argument, we are saying this is why it's important. So if you give us that information from the outset, it makes it easier for us to make the argument, because then we don't have to do the research. But it also makes it a stronger argument because it's backed up by the information that you guys have been gathering for months and months and months. So for example, if it's the state just took up this bill and we want to talk about the impact that would have on your constituents at the local level and how we can translate that at the federal level, that's super helpful, as opposed to, if I get an email that says, hey, I'm with this organization and I want to talk about campaign finance reform. Now I have to like research the organization. I have to research what issues you might be talking about. I have to research why we should particularly be interested in those things. So really and truly, it's make the connection for us, make it as easy as possible, because then in my mind, it's like, oh, okay, this is like a 2-minute thing to set up versus, oh, okay, this is like 30 minutes of my time or an hour of my time to figure out if it's something I want to advocate for.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then how about number of people in the meeting? Is there a good number? Do you like a mix? Like, should you be trying to bring, a business person, people from different parts of the community? And then we'll go to Al.
I personally prefer meetings where the people in the room all have a reason for being there, which sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but I've certainly been part of meetings where it's, there's 15 people and there's not that much room on the Hill, but there's like 15 people. Only one person's doing the talking and the others were just there because they wanted the experience of being there. And that is fantastic. I too would want that experience. I totally get it. But from my perspective, it's hard to have that one-on-one conversation if there's all of these people who might decide to add their 2 cents in or, whatever. So I don't know that there's an ideal number. Space constraints are real. Offices, if you've seen them, are small. We have maybe a bigger one. We actually have a designated conference room. A lot of people don't, but that probably fits only 8 people total, including the staff member, unless people are standing on the side, which we've done. So be cognizant of that. But really and truly, if you have just 2 people who are from the district and know the issue and can talk about it, totally fine. If you think that you would benefit from 4 people who can still make that case, also totally fine. But if it's one person who is the person to talk to and then 10 people who are just there, that starts to get a little bit overwhelming, a little you're like, okay, well, but who am I actually supposed to talk to? Who are all these people?
Gotcha. Yep, makes sense. So let's go to Al real quick. You got your hand up for a while. And then Marie's got a good
I just
question
want to
here, too.
ask one quick question. Where does Congressman Phillips represent?
Where? It's the kind of western suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay, I was just curious what state.
Yeah, it's Minnesota. It's in the western suburbs. So we kind of do this C around Minneapolis. We have a little bit of the north of it, a little bit of south of it, but mostly west. And so Congressman Phillips, he ran for election for the first time in 2018 and was kind of at the front end of the post-Trump suburban election wave. He flipped a seat that was had been held by a Republican for decades before him. So we're in that very much that community of individuals who have probably lived in the city for a long time, but are now starting to kind of move out a little bit, still be connected to the city, but not. So that's kind of the demographics of our district.
Suburbanites.
Yeah, but it's very lovely. If you have a chance to go, highly recommend.
Thanks, Al. Thanks for that.
Oh, we got an Eden Prairie here. Great.
Marie, you had one in the chat. You want to ask it yourself? Go for it.
Sure. Thanks for joining us tonight, Trey. Since Representative Phillips is a member of the Problem Solvers, I believe he's vice chair, isn't he? Or he was?
He was.
Okay.
I don't believe he's going to be vice chair this session. He's actually he's been elected by his colleagues to be in the Democratic leadership. So he's going to be a member of Problem Solvers.
Okay.
I think this is the first time that we've had someone who's a member of Problem Solvers, but also a member of their party leadership.
Mm.
And I think we're trying to figure out what that actually means in a congressional setting. But he loves problem. He'll tell anyone he meets with they have a weekly meeting, and that's that hour where they meet is one of his favorite aspects of Congress.
So my question actually has to do with, and obviously this session is just getting started, so I don't imagine that they may have even met yet, but do you know, has there been any bipartisan discussion in Problem Solvers about how to bring an amendment resolution forward that would have bipartisan agreement? I mean, we have actually, I'm in New Jersey, but in 2021, we lobbied with my colleague's sister, who was in Representative Brian Fitzpatrick's district in PA1, and we met with his staffer. And, you know, we were hoping that maybe there'd be a little more receptivity, but there were some other things going on, obviously. And he actually, I think, had come out a long while ago and said that he, you know, Citizens United was a horrendous decision from the Supreme Court. So I was just really interested to see if there was some sort of discussion that you're aware of in the Problem Solvers.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. As an institution, you know, as a group, I don't think they have had those discussions, but individually, member to member, that is certainly happening at kind of a, not at a level where it's, you know, we're ready to act. But one of the things that it's fascinating, because members of Congress hate fundraising because it takes so much of their time, just so much that, you know, and there's buildings around the Capitol, because you can't fundraise in the Capitol. You have to walk across the street to a designated building, and you're you know, doing call time basically to raise money. And a lot of members don't like it. And so in Problem Solvers, members kind of talk about, like, you know, what that means for them. My sense is there's like starting to bubble some like potential room for negotiations around things. Now, does that mean anything will ever happen? I don't know. Is that like solid and real? I also don't know. Congressman Fitzpatrick is a really great partner on that. He's done some election campaign finance reform legislation. It's not quite as far as, like, you know, kind of what Democrats have proposed. So Democrats proposed like HR1, like For the People Act, which is kind of this really big comprehensive thing. Brian Fitzpatrick has a much smaller version, but you can tell that he's thinking about it in a real way and is concerned about some of these things. There was a constitutional amendment in the last Congress to overturn Citizens United. It just overturned Citizens United. And that was co-sponsored by, I believe, is John Katko, who's a Republican.
Yeah, that's our amendment resolution that we worked on
Yep.
in the last Congress. Yeah.
And he was a member of Problem Solvers. He's unfortunately not in Congress anymore, and no one has stepped up to the plate in a way that he has. But I think, you know, like Brian Fitzpatrick and John Katko and a couple other members are like, they're starting to see it and they're starting to feel it. And I do think, you know, a group like the Problem Solvers will be a venue where some of that discussion takes place. And I've been working with Mike and others at American Promise, like kind of thinking through how we kind of approach that, because it's a delicate balance, because if Brian Fitzpatrick introduced a constitutional amendment, you could get 50 Democrats who co-sponsor it in a heartbeat. And that's Brian Fitzpatrick and 50 Democrats. And then like other Republicans are like, well, what is that? I don't know. And so it's kind of a lot of behind the scenes work to set it up so that so it doesn't fail as soon as it happens. But it's a long process.
Thank you. We're working on that from the Republican side. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have to say, you know, the meetings that you guys do on Capitol Hill are very effective. If for no other reason than you're kind of educating staff to like be on the lookout for it. You know, maybe they don't agree with you 100%, 90%, 80%, but you're planting that seed of like, hey, you know, we're seeing this, and so when they see the news, it pops out at them a little bit because now they're kind of primed to look at it. And so you're kind of laying the groundwork for when the time is right. You know, they can kind of talk to their boss about it and maybe get their boss to take some action. So it's not one of those like immediate gratification for something this difficult. And you guys know this, it's hard to get that immediate gratification, but you can definitely see the workings happening.
So I'm going to pivot to Chris in just a second, but Trey, I got to ask you one more question, because you know, at NCLC this year, we always like to give an example of like a good meeting and like a bad meeting, right? What that might look like.
Sure.
And we exaggerate it a little bit, but, you know, we have fun with it. But I think there's a lot to learn from, you know, from your experience, have you seen something that's like, well, this is not an effective meeting, like one that just kind of went off the rails, and like something to look for when we're in this meeting? Like,
No,
what-
I
what
have
would
I
that
have
be?
a go-to. I have a go-to. There's an advocacy group that was kind of had a perspective on kind of some tech regulations. And I had never met the person before. They reached out to me to give me an update, not kind of like not really like asking for my opinion or anything, but they just wanted to kind of lay of the land, educate me. You know, great. This was going to be a tough vote, one way or another, if it came up, and I needed to get smarter on it. So I took the meeting, and the guy spent 30 minutes talking at me. I didn't get a word in otherwise, and it was like just rapid fire. It was a presentation delivered, honed, like the jokes were everything was prepared. The end of the 30 minutes gone, I hadn't said a single word. We were done. And I was like, okay, I have to go to the next meeting. It's fine. And it's fine. I learned a little bit from the meeting. They didn't learn anything about my boss's perspective, which, I think one of the things that you guys want to do is learn the perspective of the office that you're doing, so you can take that and use that later to help hone your meetings. But it was fine. About 4 months later, that same individual reaches out to me and asks to schedule a meeting on the same topic. And so in my mind, I'm thinking there must be some movement. There's an update. There's some change. Sure, I did learn a lot the first time. I'll take this meeting and see what has changed. The guy got on the meeting, and it was the exact same presentation, word for word. Did not remember he had met with me previously. Just no recognition whatsoever. So the moral is, one, remember who you've met with before. But two, it is really important to personalize it a little bit. It doesn't have to be like incredible details of, that specific members, what they said 10 years ago, or this vote or whatever. But just a little bit of did you know that the Minnesota Secretary of State thinks that this is a problem? Or I noticed Dean took this pledge to do whatever. Just something that's why you're talking to me specifically. And then let's have a little bit of a dialogue, not a lecture series. So that hands down, and I've got to say, it's only happened once. Hasn't happened again, so that isn't a usual occurrence. But let me tell you, I've used that example multiple times because it was egregious.
Yeah, nice. Love it. Well, we could sit here and talk to you for another hour, Trey, easily, but we do kind of have to pivot a little bit and wrap up unless there's any last, thoughts or questions before we pivot over to Chris.
Well, I appreciate everyone's questions, engagement. You guys are doing fantastic work. The things you're doing at the state level help push us at the federal level. Both sides of the aisle kind of use that as a metric, a gauge. So things you're doing are fantastic. And if you guys are up on the Hill, kind of lobbying us at the federal level, drop on by. Our office is fantastic. You don't even need to let us know you're coming beforehand. Just come in and say you're coming to look for me, and I'll come say hi.
Very cool. Can we still get donuts on Fridays with Dean?
You can. Donuts with Dean every Friday that we are in session. RSVP, send an email to our office, RSVP in advance, but Donuts with Dean, you get donuts, and then Dean gives a personal tour of the Capitol, which is a very good tour, surprisingly. So
That's pretty amazing that he still does. That's awesome. Yeah. So it's a good tip.
Yep.
No to end on. Well, thanks, Trey. Appreciate all the insight, and thanks for being such a strong ally of us here.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Trey.
All right. Well, cool. That was great stuff. Now, Chris, you're going to give a somewhat brief overview of the candidate pledge and where we're at on that, and some of the trainings people can look forward to over the next month or so, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was glad to hear from Trey. I'm glad we used our time there, and I'll try to give us a real quick overview of what to expect with the Candidate Pledge campaign this year, and going to go over the Citizen Challenge as well. So thanks, folks. I'm Chris Kerr. If I haven't met you, I'm the National Field Director here at American Promise, and one of my roles is to run the Candidate Pledge campaign. The Candidate Pledge Campaign, for those who have not worked on it, is our effort to get elected officials at all levels of government to pledge their support and say that they'll use their office, if elected, to advance the 4R Freedom Amendment. And this is something we've been doing since 2018. Since that time, we've had over 700 candidates from all different political affiliations all across the country, at all levels of government have signed the pledge, and large part thanks to some of the volunteers here who are on this call. Our strategy in 2023 is it's an off-year election, so there are still some opportunities for us to work on this Candidate Pledge campaign. There are 4 states that are running state legislative elections: Mississippi, Louisiana, New Jersey, and Virginia. And so there are opportunities there. I have not yet talked to our volunteers in these states to get, to hear whether or not it's something that they're interested in doing, or if they feel will be an effective use of our time. But the option is there for us to conduct outreach at the state level in those states. We can also look at sitting legislators. So it's not just the candidate pledge, it's a candidate and elected official pledge. And when we're going out, setting up meetings and, talking to elected officials or city councilors, and at any level of government, we can be asking them. One of the asks that we can be making is that they sign the candidate pledge. And that's, maybe an easy way to start the conversation and move towards bigger asks like legislation or local resolutions. Another category that we can look at are presidential candidates for 2024. They're going to, assuming that there's going to be a bigger pool of candidates this year, they'll start announcing soon. And we want to be prepared to approach those individuals early on and get them to sign the pledge. And then we can look at municipal level elections. So in addition to the states that are running elections, there are many municipalities across the country, and we can look at setting up meetings with candidates at that level. We're going to be doing regular meetings to go more in depth on this stuff. Starting in April, we're going to have a meeting on the 3rd Thursday of every month, but we have a different schedule over the next month and a half. And I wanted to just break that down quickly for folks. We're going to be doing a lobby week in March, the second or third week of March. And so we're encouraging volunteers to set up meetings with legislators in their state and during that time. And we've got some meetings leading up to that point to prepare us. We're going to have a workshop on February 23rd that'll cover information about the candidate pledge as well as the Citizen Lobby Week. And then the following week on March 1st, we're going to have a second workshop. And then using this space next month, our national volunteer meeting will also be about legislative advocacy, and we'll sort of, review our content and training materials for that Citizen Lobby Week. So that's February 23rd, March 1st, and March 8th to continue our focus on legislative advocacy. Do you have something like
I just wanted to add in there. I know the March 8th call is on the website, but there's no RSVP yet. That will appear. We will send you follow-ups with the links, the proper RSVP links to all these calls. The reason is because we might be changing to a new system. We were hoping to even have it by today. Super excited for it. I hope we go to it, but they just need to work out some details over on the tech side. But it's like Zoom, but it's way more fun to use and way more clean, and you're going to get reminders for these calls, and it's just going to be better on almost every level. So the tech team is pushing pretty hard to get that implemented. That's the only reason that we haven't made the RSVPs available yet. So just stay tuned for that.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And then just bear with me for one more minute, because we've got one other thing I wanted to go over, which is the Citizen Challenge for this month. As part of our effort to mobilize volunteers and get people active in their states and move this amendment forward, we are going to be implementing a monthly Citizen Challenge, and that's part of our new Action Center. So I just wanted to show you real quick. I'm going to share my screen. I'll show you on the website. This is what it looks like. And actually, I'll show you how to get there. You go to americanpromise.net and you're going to go into the Action Center Mike mentioned earlier. If you haven't already, it only takes a minute to sign up. And then from here, to move this thing out of my line of sight, you can click on the Citizen Challenge at the top, and it'll give you information about the course. This month's challenge, we've got a brief video from yours truly going over how to research candidates in our database on the website to find out whether or not they've signed the candidate pledge. And our challenge to you is to use this template that we have in here to contact an elected official at any level of government. So you could reach out to a city councilor, you could reach out to a selectman, you could reach out to your state representative or your congressperson and ask them to sign the American Promise Candidate Pledge. It only takes a minute. If you're not sure how to find out who your elected officials are, we actually have another video right here. There's a brief tutorial here that'll show you how to use a few simple online tools to identify who your elected officials are, state, municipal, and federal elected officials. And from there, you can find their contact information, and you'll want to use their campaign email, not their legislative email, since a lot of times they can't do this kind of work because of tax limitations. So, email their campaign email, and you can send this email template that we've included. You might want to tailor it just a little bit, maybe, add a thank you for co-sponsoring a specific piece of legislation that has to do with the work that we're doing to personalize it. And, if you get in there and you decide that you get one done, go ahead and send a few more too. So easy challenge, but can go a long way towards starting our process of setting up meetings and getting folks to sign the candidate pledge. And if you have any questions about this while you're working in the Citizen Action Center, feel free to reach out to me, and be happy to help you with that process. So I think that's it. I'm going to hand it back to Mike in case there's anything else we need to cover before we wrap up.
Thank you very much, Chris, for going over all that. And I encourage all of you to just dive in there if you haven't yet to the Action Center. It is pretty limited right now, like I said, but there are a few things you can go through. The Becoming an Active Citizen, I think, has like 11 different small little things that you can go through just to start getting a feel for it. And the Citizen Pledge, pretty straightforward, and fairly easy. We provide some templates. Of course, you can change them, but the more people we get doing this every month, the better. That's the idea, right? The year from now, that just keeps growing. So really encourage you to check that out, and obviously give us feedback too. It's going to be an evolving process over there on the Action Center.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to go after the low-hanging fruit for your first time. If you haven't done candidate pledge outreach before, I was looking in the database and realized there's a bunch of candidates in Maine that haven't signed the pledge, but would likely sign it, and they just haven't been asked. So, especially for that first one, go after someone you think might sign the pledge, and we just haven't asked them yet. Get the ball rolling that way.
Mike, can I chip in for a second? I would encourage people to use the rating system, because it's like Yelp, right? So the more ratings there are, the more for each one of your challenges, each one of the segments, the courses, quote unquote, there's a 5 stars across, and you can rate, and then the rating is kept there for the next person that comes along, so they can see what the rating is.
Yeah, easy on the 3-star ratings though. Don't have to be too honest. Yeah, good point though, Marie. I think you're the first one to actually leave a rating. So I noticed that. Very cool. And it's going to be exciting to see that actually, as it builds out and a lot of people start using it, right? Oh, why is this one 4 versus this one's 5? Is it better? Yeah, maybe it is, learn from that. So pretty excited to have people start using that. The Citizen Challenge, Susan, I don't know. You just sent me a message. It says February for me, so I'm not sure what you're looking at. I can touch base with you on that after. Marie, I noticed you had mentioned Thursday and Wednesday. I think that is the plan now. I think that's what Chris was initially thinking. If you think there's a reason that we should try to push it for the Wednesday, we could maybe talk about that. But I think that's the way we're gonna do it. So, yeah, that's, I think that's probably good. So I think we can wrap up. Appreciate all of you for coming on here tonight and listening and asking, good questions. And you know what? I'm not going to let you go quite yet. I'm sorry. I got to do one more thing. What I wanted to do was I wanted to just give you one link. I'm going to drop it in the chat. And it's something that I really want to encourage everyone to start doing more, is taking advantage of these new calendars that we just rolled out last month. We have, if you go to the Action Center and you have to be logged in, you click on resources and you click on get involved, you're going to see different types of calendars. So if you want to get support for community outreach, legislative advocacy, business advocacy, they go into different calendars, depending on what the topic is. So I really encourage everyone to it's 30-minute meetings to just start getting support in that way. So if you want to just dive into legislative strategy in your state, if you want tips for, how to talk bipartisan, if you want tips for resources for meeting with legislators, just grab a 30-minute spot, and most likely it'll be me. And I have tons and tons of experience doing this. And I really want to pass it on to as many people who are willing to listen. So I just dropped it there for you, but you can always find it in the Action Center, all those different calendars. And with that said, I will let you go. And I look forward to seeing you all real soon. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike and Chris.
All.
Good night.
Take care, Mike.
You too, Ted.